All right, breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. A verdict has been reached in South Carolina versus Alex Murdaugh. The Murdaugh family has arrived at the courthouse, and we are waiting to jump live. While we're doing this, I got my good friend, awesome trial attorney, and extraordinary person here at the Law Crime Network, Brian Buckmeyer. And I know that at some point in time, we're going to have Anjanette Levy if we don't have her already. Brian, we've been waiting around for this, and me and you were both convinced that this was going to be at least, can we go home, or maybe a question, but it's a verdict, Brian, real fast, less than 3 hours. Thoughts?
Bob, I was planning out my weekend. I'm like, over the weekend, you and I could talk about the closing arguments and the summations, because it has to be Monday. I was skipping over Friday altogether, but after less than 3 hours I'm getting, that there's a verdict, now it's, what is it? My mind can't go to it being a not guilty. My mind, it's too difficult, because I thought hung jury at best, so I'm thinking, gotta be guilty.
Yeah, and Brian, we'll see if Anjanette's still, connected with us. But as trial lawyers, we have this little thing we go back and forth. And I'm sitting there, and if I'm losing this case after 3 hours, I don't care what side I'm on. That means this jury was absolutely firmly convinced. Because Brian, you know this from doing jury trials. They don't just go in there and say guilty, but they sit down, they go over how they're going to go through the process. There's a period of time for that. I mean, this is really a profound loss for somebody.
I mean, if you're losing this case, I'm punching air all day. I'm like, what did I do wrong? And in my mind, if they came back with this verdict, your summation meant nothing. They must have decided it from some piece of evidence. Maybe there's one big piece, but in a case like this, it's not just a simple did he or did he not. There's the lies, there's almost like 3 cases in one, there's the financial crimes, there's a 2021 shooting. They went through all of that and they just said, you know what? We've got a decision, and that blows my mind.
Yeah, and Brian, we were talking about before, like why, we all know the financial crimes, he's confessed to them now based on his testimony. He's gonna spend the rest of his life in jail anyway on those financial crimes, but this was a point of pride. You were bringing out a lot about what you thought the psychology was, both for him to fight this case and to take the witness stand. Talk to our audience about that.
So, Bob, we've all had clients before who have said, I want to take a plea, I want to plead guilty to this, whatever it may be. For this, I know Alec is sophisticated and intelligent enough as an attorney to say, if I take the stand and I say this, I know my liability for this other case. He could have gone up on the stand and say, hey, you want to ask me about financial crimes? I know what the judge let in, but I'm going to plead the 5th. You want to ask me about the 2021 shooting? I'm going to plead the 5th. Let the jury interpret what that means, but the depth in which he went into the details of those 2 cases tells me this is not about how much jail time he's going to spend. This is about a point of pride as to what he's willing to spend jail time for. And he was not willing to go down on the murder of his wife and son, but he was willing to go down on the financial crimes. Why? Either he's not guilty, or he is such a deranged person that he wants to manipulate everyone to save his personality, to save his good name, that he'll say, I'll steal, but I won't kill my family. And I guess the jury either did or didn't believe him. We'll find out in a few moments.
Well, you used the word pride, Brian. We have Anjanette Levy with us, who is our source. She was right on top of this, knowing that something was going down in that courthouse. Anjanette, 2 hours and 50 minutes. And when Brian uses the word pride, I can't, right in the top of my head comes, pride comes before the fall. I'm sorry, I guess Anjanette is some difficulty there, but Brian, but you could be saying, Brian, that he won even if he loses because he got to tell his story.
Yeah, I mean, everyone wants the quote-unquote their day in court. Because even if he does go down, and I've been to enough Bible classes to know the pride before the fall story as well, that he'll probably still hold to the very fact that I didn't do this. The jury may have convicted me because the prosecutor was able to bring in these financial crimes, which he's a lawyer, he's gonna say, I don't believe they should have done that. He's gonna say the judge made a horrible ruling here, there, and everywhere. But I think for him, as a point of pride, he's gonna say, no matter what the verdict, I didn't do this, I know my truth, and I think that's what he wanted at the end of the day, regardless of how much time he'll probably spend in jail. Okay,
Brian, let's play some devil's advocate here. I mean, when we talk about the speed of the verdict, and this is what lawyers do, and this is why we're crazy, we're trying to anticipate what this verdict is. Let's anticipate this verdict could be a not guilty. I know that you don't think it is based on the speed of it, but is it possible in your mind that they could come back with a not guilty? Because usually they take more time with guilties because they know the consequences. Is there any possibility of that here?
So let me be very clear. I don't say that the speed just means one thing. It's two things. So you and I have probably both had quick verdicts before where I get a not guilty after just less than an hour. What I think it is, it's the feeling you get after the summation. When you feel that someone is on top, when someone has guided the jury in a way that can only come to one logical reasoning, I don't care prosecution or defense, I'll say a quick verdict goes to that person. But this case, both sides, as I told you earlier, I didn't get the feeling that either side really said, here are the facts and I'm going to drag you to the verdict that I want. Instead, both sides kind of just said, hey, this is what you heard, and this is what I think, and they did this, and they got this wrong, and we got this right. I thought that these closing arguments were geared towards a conversation that would take a lot longer than 3 hours in the jury room, but that obviously didn't happen. So now I've got to think, well, what would have stuck in the minds of the jury that would have got them to say, hey, we don't need any questions, we don't need any readbacks, I want to give this verdict now, and I'm not wasting time. In my mind, based on the strength of the case and the arguments, I got to lean towards guilty.
And I want to point out something that may go right towards your theory there, Brian, because I felt that the rebuttal of the prosecutor was the best part of the case where the lawyers had to speak. They got away from the noose around their neck, in my opinion, the motive evidence and the financial crimes. They spoke from the heart, spoke with passion, spoke with common sense, was folksy, and they took the circumstantial pieces and put it together. I thought he did a tremendous job, and that was the last thing the jury heard, Brian.
Yeah, and that would go to my theory as well. The prosecution, and I know you've been a former prosecutor, now you're a defense attorney, I like to say you've seen the light, but I always hate when prosecutors get the last word, because that last word is so powerful. And I always tell jurors, hey, I'm going to sit down and this person's going to get up here and tell you their side of it. And I wish I got the last word, but that last word is so powerful. And if you can get that in and you see a quick verdict like this, I always think it's going to be the prosecution's day.
Yeah, it's really, it's fascinating. I'm being told that we may have Chris Adams with us, a South Carolina attorney, and with Anjanette Levy, at least I see in my little boxes. Welcome back to the show, guys. South Carolina. Anjanette, what I was saying before was that you are on top of your game. We were monitoring every news station about what was going on, and you started firing up those phones, and Brian and myself were like, we're going to be going home, but here we are. Great work. Let me go to the lawyer first. Chris, what do you think with this verdict coming back so quickly? 3 hours and 50 minutes.
Chris is here with me. Yeah, what do you think? Bob wants to know what you think of the verdict coming back so quickly, 3 hours and 15 minutes, give or take.
I was involved in a 3-month trial last year, and the jurors were out for days, and there wasn't really that much in dispute. I'm shocked that
really?
The verdict has come back this quickly, that there's unanimity this quickly. What it means, I would think the prosecutors will be feeling very confident right now.
Right.
But we will find out shortly.
Yeah, we shall see. You know, Chris, there's been a lot of discussion, about the kennel video. Was the kennel video the whole thing? Is that's just like the biggest piece of evidence it seems like that they have?
I think it is. Why would someone lie if they weren't involved in the deaths became the key issue for the prosecution. And if they have convicted in 3 hours, or 2.5 hours, then it's because they thought that there was no other explanation for Alex Murdaugh lying than the fact that he did the murders.
How pivotal is the juror issue? When the juror was dismissed today, Dick Harpootlian didn't want this juror gone.
Well, you've been in the courtroom. You guys have had coverage in the courtroom. One of the jurors handed a Kleenex to Alex Murdaugh when he testified. I don't know if it was this juror or not.
We were told it wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
You react to body language, you react to eye contact, and there's some jurors that, as a defense lawyer, it breaks your heart when they're excused. Whether they get COVID or have the flu or have a car wreck or whatever the issue, or they talk to somebody about the case, they're the one you're counting on to be there for you, and to lose that person, which has happened to me, is crushing when you believe they're going to be your champion in the jury room.
So, Bob, I was relaying your question to Chris. He's surprised by this.
Yeah, first of all, it was actually, Chris will be even more surprised, 2 hours and 50 minutes. It's even shorter than that. But I'm just curious right now whether, Chris, or Antoinette, what are your, tell me, if you don't mind the audience, what led up to everything was going on? What's the vibe there? I know you were running around trying to find this information out. Is it pandemonium there or what?
You know, it's really not, Bob. You know, shockingly so. I actually ran back to the hotel and I hesitated, but I needed to get my jacket. I was chilly. I just couldn't take it anymore. And it's 5 minutes down the road. I thought no big deal. I came walking back. I saw some activity that looked a little suspicious to me and started poking around. And, you know, I've covered enough verdicts to know when something's going on, and they don't always give the vibe, right? They don't always give the vibe that the verdict is in, or there's no rushing around. They know what they're doing, you know. They're not scurrying around. They've been doing this trial for 6 weeks. They don't need to, you know, get all nervous about doing anything. And Alex Murdaugh has been inside in his holding cell this entire time throughout the deliberations. So I kind of started poking around. People were trying to be coy with revealing whether or not there was a verdict or a question. I ran into the courthouse and I was told that they asked the jurors, do you need to order dinner? And they said, no, we'll be ready in 10 minutes.
Wow.
That's what I heard happened. So no dinner for the jurors. They are, I guess, you know, not costing the taxpayers of Colleton County any more meals. So there you have it. No dinner for the jurors. They were ready to wrap it up. I was somewhat surprised only because, you know, I felt like looking at these jurors today, and I hate reading people's faces. You know, some of them were wearing COVID masks. We had the juror that we think the defense liked, you know, getting kicked off the jury, taking her dozen eggs and her belongings with her. And I was looking at them and they were paying attention to both sides, but there were a couple that would at points go, you know, like this, like enough already, I'm done. And we know they asked for a monitor, of course. You know, they want to look at exhibits possibly. Maybe there were a couple of points of contention or argument. So it's very interesting. And, you know, I've been saying for a long time, I don't think, or at least a couple of weeks, that I didn't think this would be a not guilty, a unanimous not guilty. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I thought it would either be guilty or hung jury. We have a verdict. So I could be dead wrong, but I've covered cases where they're...
Antoinette, I'm sorry to cut you off, please. The judge has just entered the courtroom. Let's go live and listen to what's going to be a monumental verdict, obviously.
I understand that there's a verdict. You may bring the jury.
Okay, so obviously, folks, we are waiting for the jury to come back. I can just tell you as a trial lawyer, and if you take a look at Murdaugh's face, and probably every lawyer there, this is a very, very tense moment for everyone. There is so much on the line, so much of an investment of time. There has never been a verdict. I'm sure, Brian, you would agree with me that you are not just kind of like, this is like being very nerve-wracking. Brian, what do you think?
I'm not even the attorney in this case. I feel like I did the summation. And I'm like, Brian, you've got no dog in the fight, or I guess South Carolina, I got no hog in the fight. But I am on the edge of my seat being like, what could it be? Because for me, I think I would be very relaxed if I heard not guilty, because like, that makes sense. I mean, if it's guilty, that makes sense. But what if it's a not guilty? Like, that would blow my mind.
Yeah. It certainly would. I mean, irrespective of what the verdict is, they put a lot of time in. The judge put a lot of time in. Obviously, people's lives and fate are on the line. It is I think one of the most intense things I've ever gone through in my life. And I agree with you. I was sitting here saying, I feel like I'm in the courtroom right now.
Like, I don't know if you guys can see it, but I can see Bob. I can see your leg kind of just going on. And I'm trying to steady my leg too. And I'm like, Brian, this is not your case.
Okay, we have audio in court.
To the clerk, who will pass it to me. And you may be seated. Defendant will rise. Madam Clerk, you may publish the verdict starting with the back, not with the, let's see, I'll tell you again. Starting with the back, flipping them over one by one.
Okay.
State of South Carolina versus.
Docket number 2022 GS 15-00592, the State of South Carolina, County of Colleton, in the Court of General Sessions in the term of 2022, July, the State versus Richard Alexander Murdaugh, defendant, indictment for murder, SC Code 16-3-0010, CDR Code 0116. You want me to turn it over? Okay. Guilty verdict. Signed by the forelady, 3-2-23. Docket number 2022-GS-15-00593, the State of South Carolina, County of Colleton, in the Court of General Sessions, the July term of 2022. The State versus Richard Alexander Murdaugh, defendant, indictment for murder, SC Code 16-3-0010, CDR Code 0116, verdict guilty, signed by the forelady, date 3/2/23. Docket number 2022-GS15-00595, the State of South Carolina, County of Colleton, Court of General Sessions, July term 2022. The State versus Richard Alexander Murdaugh, defendant, indictment for possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime, SC Code -16-23-0490, CDR Code 0549, verdict guilty, signed by the foreperson of the jury, date 3/2/23. Docket number 2022 GS-15-00594, the State of South Carolina, County of Colleton, Court of General Sessions, July term 2022. The State versus Richard Alexander Murdaugh, defendant, indictment for possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime, SC Code 16-23-0490, CDR Code 0549, verdict guilty, signed by the foreperson of the jury, 3/2/23.
Thank you. Madam Forelady and members of the jury, if that is the verdict of each and every juror, please let it be known by raising your right hands. All right, thank you. Any individual polling requested? We do, Your Honor. Madam Clerk, you'll need to individually poll the jury according to their juror numbers.
Number 193. Was this your verdict?
Yes, sir.
Is it still your verdict?
Yes.
Juror 254.
Yep.
Is this your verdict?
Yes.
Is it still your verdict?
Yes.
Juror 326. Was this your verdict?
Yes.
Is it still your verdict?
Yes.
Juror 530. Was this your verdict?
Yes.
Is this your verdict?
Yes.
Juror 544.
Yes.
Was this your verdict?
Yes.
Is it still your verdict?
Yes.
Juror 572. Was this your verdict?
Yes.
Is it still your verdict?
Yes.
Juror 578. Was this your verdict?
Yes.
Is it still your verdict?
Yes.
Juror 589. Was this your verdict? Is it still your verdict?
Yes.
Juror 630. Was this your verdict?
Yes.
Is it still your verdict?
Yes.
Juror 729. Was this your verdict?
Yes.
Is it still your verdict?
Yes.
Juror 826. Was this your verdict?
Yes.
Is it still your verdict?
Yes.
Juror 864, was this your verdict?
Yes.
Is it still your verdict?
Yes.
Your Honor, the jury has been polled.
Thank you. The jury has been polled, and the verdict is a unanimous verdict. If you will bring the alternate juror out and have her have a seat in the audience, please. You can stand there or you can sit back there, whatever you prefer. Okay. Are there any post-trial motions?
None from the state, Your Honor.
Your Honor, we would just renew our previously argued motions for a directed verdict, and at this, on the grounds, on those grounds, we would make a motion for a mistrial and to set aside the verdict.
By the state, response.
Your Honor, based on our previous arguments, we would submit that the case properly went to the jury and the verdict is proper, and would rely on those arguments.
We've been here now 28 days, first few days of jury selection, and the remainder receiving testimony, an overwhelming amount of testimony and evidence that was presented to the jury for the jury's consideration. As I indicated to the jury during the jury charge, or the charge on the law, that this was a matter solely for the jury to determine. The court found at the end of the state's case that there's sufficient evidence to find the defendant guilty if the evidence was believed by the jury. Likewise, at the end of the defense's case, when the motion was renewed, the court found that the evidence was sufficient for the jury to find the defendant guilty. The jury has now considered the evidence for a significant period of time, and the evidence of guilt is overwhelming, and I deny the motion. Mr. Murdaugh, you now having been found guilty of 2 counts of murder involving your wife and your son, 2 counts of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime, the burden now comes upon the court to impose a sentence. Given the lateness of the hour and the victim's rights that must be taken into consideration and complied with under the Victim's Bill of Rights, and consider what I would anticipate to be a number of people who might have something to say regarding sentencing, we will defer sentencing to a later date. Of course, the minimum sentence for murder is 30 years. The maximum sentence is life imprisonment as to each count. And on the weapons charge, the sentence is up to 5 years, or 5 years, which has to be concurrent if a life sentence is imposed. When would you all like to reconvene for sentencing? I would like to give everyone an adequate opportunity to prepare for it.
State will be ready at 9:30 in the morning, Your Honor.
We could do it at 9:30 tomorrow morning also.
All right. The defendant is remanded to the custody of the Colleton County Sheriff's Department. And he may be taken away.